Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Welsh Republic podcast, episode number 19. And I am here with a very special guest today, Styxhexenhammer666 Official. You might have seen him on the Jesse B. Peterson show. He's done an interview with Laura Southern. And you've also done an interview a long time ago with, what was it again? The Kills stream?
Yes, it was actually Worski's show at the time, and it was Sargon versus Spencer about the alt-right versus liberalism, and I showed up for that, and it was a great time. That wasn't an interview, though. That was just a flat-out blood sports debate.
How was your day going today, Styx?
It's going incredibly well because the infant actually decided to sleep properly last night. Got some gardening in, went sunning. It's a good day.
Do you get up to anything much?
Like what? Work or?
Work. Anything fun?
Yeah, I was actually editing earlier today as well. So I've got one book done. That was done yesterday. I do editing and author works on the occult mainly. Unfortunately, Amazon actually does not have a working link to purchase it right now. So I have to wait to announce it until Amazon unfucks itself. So
I'm sure many of your fans are looking forward to your next book, which is going to be great. I think it's going to be fantastic, the book.
It's on erroneous occultism, a cautionary guide for people who want to study magic.
You heard it there first, folks. There you go. So, tell me a bit about yourself, Styxhexenhammer666. How did you first become a podcaster? What brought you into the world of politics and spirituality?
Well, not really podcast, although Substack does actually offer that now. And I'm really thinking about doing sort of this kind of thing, like an audio show style thing. I know there's Spotify and YouTube's dabbling with it now. Everyone's getting into podcasts. And it's funny because I can remember almost 20 years ago, that was sort of the rising thing. And then video became prominent and everyone jumped aboard that. And now podcasting's making a comeback. Which is hilarious to me. I get Joe Rogan and stuff. As far as politics go, I was almost unwitting in getting into it. I gave basic opinions about the abortion, gay rights, guns, taxes, etc. for years and years. But then all of a sudden I started covering the 2016 election. And what happened is that people started noticing the content more and more because my analysis was judged as being accurate. And then all of a sudden there was this massive flurry of people subscribing to the channel, partially as the result of Sargon of Akkad's video right after the election, Due Diligence. He was talking about me there. I think I gained 15,000 subscribers in a week. And since then I've been covering more politics because it's become sort of like a day job thing. As far as the occult, the book side is the most important aspect of that. And that goes back now, I think, about 7 years, which is that I went to Amazon and I was always interested in magic and the history of religion, things like that. And I wanted to get some books on the subject. But when I went to Amazon, I realized something, which was that if you wanted something inexpensive, typically it was just a ripoff of a scanned PDF from the Internet Archive. And that's fully available for free anyway in the digital form. And if you wanted something that was proper, it was prohibitively expensive if you're not, well off. I'm a poor kid at the time. I have no significant income, and they want to charge $40 for a very short paperback work. And I said, well, I bet I can edit these works, make them better, number one, make them cheaper, number two, and then I can use the audience that I've got to promote them, and people will buy them because I'm not charging an arm and a leg, but they're getting something physical. And it's properly formatted. It's not a crappy scan that retains all of the problems of the original text. And indeed, that has become my main form of income. And I'm actually going to be returning to editing works fairly soon. I've got another work that's about 90% completed, a couple of compilations to do, and I want to do a basic introductory work on occultism, which people have asked me for about half a decade now. After that, it's right back to editing.
So, also, with the way a lot of people seem to see you as a Satanist, are you a Satanist anymore? Because I remember a long time ago, you did a video where you left Satanism. Can you give more about that?
Yeah, no, I'm not a Satanist. I see Satanism as positive if you intend to use it as a stepping stone into the wider spiritual world. And I've described this before. The problem is that a lot of people, they're born into a religion, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, whatever, and they're fed a bunch of opinions by other human beings. It doesn't even necessarily have to be part of any authentic doctrine or interpretation of dogma. It can be human opinion. It can be superstition or whatever. And what I compare it to is, imagine that you've got a computer and it's got a bunch of bloatware on it. It's got a bunch of programs that are supposedly useful, but really you're not using them. They're nonsensical. They're just taking up more space on the computer. You have to purge yourself of that first, and then you can compile what you actually want to do with that computer. The same is true of Satanism. Satanism effectively is a complete vacuum. It sucks everything away as far as spirituality. It's completely atheistic. It teaches you to not be judging yourself for false reasons, to not feel guilty for things you shouldn't feel guilty for. You have to use common sense, though. It's an initiatory step, I believe, in the occult. The problem is not everyone can use it in that manner. Some people will get stuck in it. They'll become like the amazing atheist, effectively, with a floor show. Other people can't use it because there's too much superstition. They don't understand critical thinking. But for those that do, who want to cleanse themselves of bad programming, of bloatware, effectively spiritually, they can then go and they can study the spiritual, and it'll be a much more refined study. This even includes people who are, let's say you're a Christian, but much of what you've been taught about Christianity, it's just human opinion. It comes from a church. It doesn't come from any authentic interpretation of the dogma that you made or any proper interpretation objectively. It just comes from the pastor, the priest, or whatever. You purge yourself of that, and then you delve back into Christendom. You delve back into Christianity, and I think that you can do a better job of interpreting the dogma. I don't see the spiritual as having an end goal. I see it as a path, as an adventure, basically, for your entire life. I don't want to lock myself into one path. And that's why I left Satanism too, because once I had gleaned everything that I could from it, there's no reason to be a Satanist anymore, because it's a vacuum. There's nothing there to be offered beyond that.
So a lot of people seem to say that now we are living in the end times, the rapture is going to happen, and that the Antichrist is supposed to be coming, and that Jesus is going to return. What do you think is going to happen with humanity in the next 20 years? Do you think humanity is going to go extinct? Do you think it's going to reach a good point? Or do you think life is just going to go on as normal?
I don't think that humans will go extinct. Even if we had a nuclear war, there would be survivors. What I do think is that there are tough times ahead. My hope is that this spawns a counter movement in which people promulgate more liberty, they defend their rights more, that the chain of apathy that we've had, especially post-World War II, is broken. Because what people used to do is they were very civically involved. In the absence of the internet, television, and stuff, my grandfather used to talk about this. All the old dudes, all the old timers would go to the general store, they'd buy the newspaper, and they'd stand around debating it for hours because they had nothing else to do. But at least they were aware of what was going on, even from the legacy media perspective. They were involved in that. These days, people don't really do that anymore. They're too tied up in other things, in wanton materialism, pedestrian political opinions, etc., that are often influenced by the legacy media anyway. And there's no attempt to change things. I've been recently focusing more on calling out black pillars, people who they're like crabs in a bucket, some people term it. And the idea is that people will recognize the system is broken, and they'll say, well, maybe there's a way to solve it. Maybe there's a way to fix the system as it is. The black pillars will drag them back into the bucket and say, no, the system is irreparably broken. Why are you even trying, cuck? And I get this on a regular basis and find it amusing. What I do is I try to give people tips on how they can survive and thrive in what really is a new dark age when you think about it. To be more self-sufficient, learn new skills, jury nullification on the civic level is a huge thing. And these are all things that I promote regularly.
So with the definition of black pill, what do you think is wrong with black pill? And do you think it's any different to... Hello, kitty cat. Your cat's very cute. What's his name? What's your cat's name?
This is Yana.
Oh,
She's a
that's a
permanent
beautiful
fixture
name.
of the channel.
I bet she gets a lot of attention from people.
Oh yeah,
Saying hi to the
she
cat,
demands it.
Um, like I was saying with the whole black pill narrative, do you think the black pill narrative is no different to the red pill and blue pill, or do you think it's just as negative?
Um, Well, I think being red pilled and understanding that there's a problem is perfectly fine. The black pill is sort of a takeoff on that, which is you've identified there's a problem, but then you are all doom and gloom and you say, well, the problem's too big. There's nothing I can do about it. And so I'm just going to give up. There are people that don't want to give up. You don't have to be unaware of the fact that there's a problem. You don't have to be blue pilled and think everything's fine in order to not be completely demoralized. And the black pillars come in different varieties, different flavors of licorice, as you will. There's the black pillar that is a shill. So they're trying to demoralize people for one political purpose or another. Accelerationists, glowing ones, feds, etc. Then there are black pillars that genuinely believe it. They're not trying to be malevolent. They've lost hope. And what I try to do is instill in them a little bit of hope. And I think that if people were to self-improve even marginally, drop one vice, learn one new skill, make one new social connection, whatever you have to do to make life more bearable when we do have irresponsible globaloid leadership, so-called leadership, destroying the world, destroying civilization. Whatever you can do, you should do.
So all of that, there's this whole talk in the United States about gun laws and about the Texas shooting, about how that's pretty much, and the Buffalo shooting, how that is being used to pretty much, fulfill the agenda of taking the Second Amendment away. Do you think that the elite and the New World Order, do you think they're going to succeed in taking the Second Amendment away? And what is your thoughts about the whole trying to regulate gun laws in the United States, and do you think that mental health is a big problem when it comes to shooting and mass shooting in America?
Mental health is definitely one of the foremost issues, but technically, the biggest issue is gang crime. So you have a bunch of inner city gangs, often drug related. This is spawned in part by the open border, in part by the drug war. You can address those. You can probably solve for 50% of the offensive shootings in the United States. That would drop massively the gun crime rate right there, drive-bys, etc. We just had a leftoid try to assassinate a sitting SCOTUS justice. You notice that that's not much in the news. The biggest part of gun crime, so-called, or gun killings or gun violence, is suicide. Addressing depression would be much more easy if instead of treating people like cattle and simply giving them a handful of antidepressants, we actually had a society that gave a damn about them. Unfortunately, we don't have that right now. We have a bunch of dispossessed people with few familiar or friendly connections. We have a society that doesn't care about these people, and so naturally, some people snap and kill themselves.
And people not getting outside enough and just being isolated and just not being able to socialize.
Oh yeah, imagine the suicide rate is skyrocketing right now, and part of that's due to the lockdowns. Absolutely. As far as the elites doing away with the concept of gun ownership, it's not going to happen. We just saw what happened in the Senate literally the other day, which is that a bipartisan agreement was so watered down that even the liberals hate it. So I see the writing on the wall.
I totally agree. I think, if they're going to try and take away all the guns in America, it's absolutely outrageous. Like, how on earth are you going to do that, especially when there's basically more guns there than people? And if the elite are going to try and do that, as what someone once said, 76 will commence again. What's your thoughts on the gun thing that they're trying to pass in? And do you think that schools need better security system in America?
Yeah, I made a video on that topic this morning. I think that some of the provisions are unconstitutional, red flag law expansions, although it's an extension of red flag laws that is designed to help the states to pass them. It's a resource base, basically, which means nothing. There's a reason why the Republicans in the Senate will vote for this, because it's meaningless. Another one is looking at juvenile records for sales for people who are 18 to 21. Again, it violates the 14th Amendment equal protection clause because you're not considering those juvenile records if they're 22. Same person, slightly different age, totally different threshold for exercising their Second Amendment rights fully. Clearly is not going to pass muster. I think it will be injuncted almost immediately by a federal court when it comes into flow. As far as the mental health money, I'm in favor of this. The problem being mental health, of course, is a big umbrella term. Mental illness is a big umbrella term. There's a big difference between someone who has some sort of psychotic disorder. They literally lose track of reality, dissociate entirely from it, and go crazy. There's a big difference between that and someone who's depressed. There's a big difference between someone who is schizophrenic and someone who is bipolar. There's a big difference between borderline and Asperger's syndrome. The problem is that the terminology used is too vague. Again, this is why I imagine the courts will eventually step in and have no choice but to shoot it down. Unfortunately, that will probably require that someone who is mentally ill but cognitively stable and should be able to own guns gets gunned down because they refuse to cede their weapons to the cops when somebody makes a topical complaint about them. It will require that a person die in order for this to become a Supreme Court case. The liberals have set this up on purpose. They like the idea of people dying. They like the idea of people suffering, which is why they're leftoids as far as these things go. As far as school fortification, it's sad that we have to do that, but most schools have resource officers anyway. We're just freeing up more money to have a few more of them. If you're not going to let the teachers have arms, and they will fire back if fired upon because they're trying to save their lives, if the teachers can't have guns, as they have in certain rural parts of the United States, you're going to need more resource officers. I see that as fine.
How would you fix the United States political system?
In what way?
Like socially, how would you get rid of the corruption? Would you get rid of the Federal Reserve? Would you get rid of voter ballots? How would you fix it if you were the president?
Well, if you're the president, you're constrained by the Constitution. So let's just say I'm a dictator instead. And I'm a benevolent dictator, like I'm a Pinochet sort of person. So I can change things how I want, and then I'll step down and I'll exile myself. Okay. What I would do first and foremost, there should be no electronic balloting in voting. To take care of that issue permanently, paper only, in person only, unless there's a real good excuse why you need an absentee ballot. That's number one. Number two, I would eliminate all gun control. I don't think that any of it's necessary. We have had periods in U.S. history where we didn't have really an effective gun control. We didn't have a bunch of mass shootings. There are other reasons that we're having them now, social alienation being the big one. I would suggest that people boycott China. I would just use the bully pulpit and hammer away at the issue. I wouldn't even try to force it in a legislative sense. I would just say, hey, buy local. We're going to do everything that we can to bring the cost down, by the way. Be a long haul sort of thing. I guess I'd be dictator for more than a couple of years. And then most crimes, this is the big one, and I've talked about it before. I would recategorize the way in which crime and punishment is meted out. So there are significant crimes with a victim. Throw the book at them. Put them in the Coliseum, let them fight to the death, and 1/16 of them, they can go free. There are significant crimes without a victim. Well, restitution. Okay, you committed fraud. No specific individual was harmed during the process. You have to pay the money back. Well, you get 1,000 hours of community service. That should more or less cover it. Something like that. There are crimes for which there's a victim, but they're not significant. So simple assault or something. Well, spend a while in jail, pay restitution. There could be a civil case. And then there are crimes for which there's no clear-cut victim or victims, and they're not particularly significant. They should be decriminalized entirely. Drug possession, jaywalking, things of that nature. Violating some gun ordinance. Well, you had a 15-round magazine in this weapon. You're only supposed to have a 10-round magazine. Oh, who cares? I would decriminalize that.
So you say you're living in the Netherlands right now, right? Correct?
Yes. Yeah, I'm currently in Enschede.
In the Netherlands, what things do you like that they do politically better than in the United States?
Well, the political system here is definitely lower drama. That is, I mean, people still pile shit upon Mark Rutte and so forth. But ultimately, it's not quite the same. Like, you don't see a bunch of lawn signs out when it's election season. In the United States, it's much more present. It's much more in your face. And I come from a small town in Vermont, which is lopsidedly Democrats. Even there, you see a huge amount of political turnout. I can't even imagine what it would be like in a swing state. Like, if you go to New Hampshire or Iowa in a mainline election, it must be literally everywhere. Here, occasionally, you'll see a political message. The biggest thing, ironically, communist graffiti. Commie groups like to put up stickers and stuff like that. I have a feeling that most people react negatively to it.
What is your feelings towards communism?
I oppose communism as a murderous, insane ideology that has clearly failed over and over again. And that's self-evident, so it's sort of low-hanging fruit, I guess.
What about do you think capitalism is any better?
Capitalism is perfect. It's the most perfect system that can exist because it conforms to human biology. It takes the competitive urge and it turns it into something constructive.
So, with the inflation problem, how is the inflation issue going on in the Netherlands than the United States?
Oh, the inflation here is worse, actually. I can't remember the exact number. I think it's 13% or something like that. So yeah, you could have it worse in the United States. That's definitely true. The thing is that all of the inflation in the world is united by one central premise, one central cause, which is lockdownerism. The world governments decided to hyperbolically overreact to COVID. And I won't say too much more because I'm assuming this goes on YouTube. So I'll mince my words slightly. I'll be careful here linguistically. They decided to react by closing the ports, closing the shipping lanes, closing air travel, hyper-restricting businesses, hyper-restricting personal freedom and movement, closing parks, closing schools, et cetera, leading to a situation where an enormous proportion of the production, that is the supply, was destroyed. Now the supply is still considerably less than it should be, but the demand is skyrocketing. Not only are people back to where they were as far as what they want to buy, but you also have less supply because of remaining shipping problems, and the demand is even higher because people were repressed for so long that they just want to splurge. They want to take that stimulus check that they got and they want to go to Disneyland. And unfortunately, this has led to a situation where the shortages are becoming even worse. I don't see it repairing itself anytime soon in most nations in the world.
I totally agree. I think the inflation problem is just not really a situation, especially the world would want to be in, with especially the economic fallout from COVID.
Yeah.
So, with the political system in Holland, how does it work in Netherlands? How does the political system work there?
Well, I'm not an expert on the Dutch political system, and the reason why is this. I could look into it and probably learn it in an afternoon, but I'm a resident of the Netherlands. I can't vote, I can't hold office, I'm not a citizen of the Netherlands. And that's why I'm very reluctant to weigh in too much on the politics here, because technically I'm a guest in the country. And unlike a lot of other people who migrate from one area to the other, I believe when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And so I have respect for their system. It's just like there's a monarchy here. You've got a king, you've got a queen, who I think is originally Argentinian, actually, and their kids. You got a royal family. It's literally against the law to criticize them in the Netherlands. You can be thrown in jail, although I don't think, generally speaking, that's particularly enforced. Looking into it, though, I'm against monarchy. I don't like the concept of kings and queens and stuff. But I'm in the Netherlands and I'm a guest in the country. I'm not going to sit there and badmouth their king. And at least he seems more reasonable than the ones in England.
Oh, that's definitely for sure. The monarchy in Britain is.
Well, I mean, I know. Again, that's sort of a low standard, but yeah, seems he's sane, which is something. I mean, Queen Elizabeth's probably by now, she's got to have something wrong with her brain. She hasn't stepped down.
She's not going to last any longer. I can tell you that. 666.
Apparently, in 2 years, she'll be the longest reigning monarch. I think I saw that earlier today.
Who was the second oldest?
Fuck, I can't remember.
Fair enough. Also, what is your thoughts on all the potential of the border crisis going on, do you think that is going to get to a point where it is just getting overwhelming?
Oh, I think it got to that point years ago. I think as far as the U.S. southern border, the last time that we attempted to do anything, we had Congress, including a significant proportion of the Republicans under Trump, his own party, stymieing the effort by withholding money and saying, well, no, it's not on our priority list. No, stopping millions of people from entering the country illegally and overwhelming border facilities, that's not really, it has nothing to do with national security. He had to go before the federal court system in order to get it green lighted. It took the better part of a year, and that was after being obstructed. One of the greatest things that he did was increasing border defense and retrofitting elements of wall. Even Biden, reluctantly at the 11th hour, he left that issue behind, and then very quietly he took that same money that had already been allocated and he finished parts of the border wall that were already under construction with their electronic monitoring, seismic monitoring, things like that. Unfortunately, there's still 100 miles or so of bollard that's still laying there rusting in the desert. So,
here's a bit of a tricky question. Can you name anything Joe Biden has done good?
He did make a suggestion, and I think it was in his State of the Union, with regards to burying power lines as much as possible in order to make them last longer and be more resistant to damage. That's basically it. But that was just a suggestion. He hasn't done anything since then.
How do you think that idea would also be better in the long term?
I can remember I grew up in Woodstock, Vermont, and they buried their central power lines long ago, and it takes a lot less effort to maintain them because storms can't bring down power lines. The transformers are more shielded, et cetera, et cetera. It's long term, it's cheaper. It also looks better. You get them out of the way and things simply look nicer in the community. So yeah, I found something that Biden has done, or at least suggested, that was positive. I've done more than most commentators could ever do.
Well, he is Sleepy Joe after all, but he is what he is. What is your opinion on the whole January 6th committee and the fact that that thing is being completely just investigated, but you've got Hillary Clinton committing her crimes and spying on Trump, and you've got the crimes that Obama and Bush and, them doing the illegal wars against the Middle East where they kill civilians. Does that anger you that those things have never been investigated, but January 6th is having its committee?
Well, some of them were, but I mean, it never goes anywhere. And the same is true of January 6th. When MSNBC says, well, the January 6th committee says that it has enough evidence to potentially indict Donald Trump at the DOJ level, it's not going to happen, dude. It's just, I don't know what la land you're living in, but he's a former president and soon to be second term president, I believe. You're not going to do shit because it would cause a constitutional crisis. I think that the January 6th Commission is a huge waste of time. And what it really boils down to is posturing. That is that right now, the Democrats can't run for re-election on the economy because the economy sucks. They can't run on crime because they were the soft on crime party and crime skyrocketed. I wonder how that happened. They can't run on the border or immigration or anything. Increasingly, they can't run on foreign diplomacy. Biden the other day was throwing Zelensky under the bus by saying, well, he didn't listen to me. I told him things were going to get bad. He just didn't listen. Now Zelensky is cock-smacking him. What are they supposed to run on? I know. We'll run on abortion and gun control and this sort of shit. Trump, orange man bad. Well, Trump's not running for office right now, and people therefore are not responding to the January 6th nonsense. And after the midterms, when the Republicans handily retake the House, they plan to investigate the investigators, which will be just as fruitless maybe, but it'll be hilarious to see the juxtaposition on gun control and abortion. And I'm pro-choice, just to be clear. I believe in a woman's right to choose. But in the United States, a considerable majority of people do want further curtails on abortion. I hate to tell people this, but the Democrats are using these issues, which they've technically lost on, gun control and abortion, because they've lost less than they've lost on the other contemporary issues. They want to distract you with things on which they have a 46% disadvantage instead of a 30% disadvantage. And that's basically it. It's just a distraction.
In 2024, let's say it's Trump against Kamala Harris. Do you think, because I'm a bit worried, do you think that they are going to try and rig the election again like they did in 2020? Or is
If this is going
Donald
on,
Trump going to
you
be
should
able to
rephrase
win?
that, because if this is going on YouTube, you should rephrase that. They're going to fortify, not rig, fortify the election.
Fortify the election, that's it, pretty much.
Yeah, they'll try, but the problem is that the states mainly control the election system, and most of the vulnerable states have defortified in part or in whole. You're also not really going to have COVID on the table. They're trying to use monkeypox for it right now, which is probably the most asinine, hilarious thing I've seen in modern politics. But people are no longer responding to it. It's just like with January 6th. In the immediate wake of January 6th, Donald Trump lost about 10 points of approval support. It was a big loss to him. Now, nobody cares. Nobody gives a shit. Everyone's already made up their minds about it. Nobody responds to it anymore. They will definitely try shenanigans. I think they will be unsuccessful. If anything, they shot their load too early, jumped the gun, overstretched like left-wing movements tend to do, and they caused a bunch of states to go in the other direction that they want them to go.
So you say you're pro-choice. What makes you pro-choice, and what scientific reasons can you say to make that makes you pro-choice?
Well, I don't need science so much as two things: historical pragmatism and civics. In the civic sense, I don't want the government making medical decisions for people. In the historically pragmatic sense, I look back to pre-Roe v. Wade times, and I say that abortifacients and other measures were taken anyway, even where abortion was illegal. Where it was legal, it was sought in a medically advanced context. You have a relatively limited loss of life and fertility from that. In areas where it wasn't legal, the rich would go to Canada or to a state where it was legal. The more poor would go to Mexico to get the abortion in some cases. And the extremely poor would puncture their cervix, in many cases causing sterility, causing sepsis and death, and so forth. I just think that trying to ban abortion is not pragmatic. People will still obtain them. They will just be less safe. And I don't want the government to engage in such things. Nonetheless, Roe v. Wade will fall, I believe, and it is legally untenable. It may be pragmatic, but I've got to separate my views on being pro-choice and a pragmatist from the constitutional issue, because constitutionally, clearly Roe v. Wade doesn't pass muster. The big problem is going to be you're going to end up with a patchwork of states, and some states may attempt to imprison or punish people for going to another state in order to seek to obtain an abortion. You'll have a separate Supreme Court case in which you may end up with a reciprocal abortion, the same way you've had reciprocal carry of firearms for the last 10 years. It'll be astonishing that we have to go through this.
Do you think that because the whole argument that life begins at conception, what is your counter argument against that?
I would say that I don't care when it begins. I care about the scope of government, number one, and pragmatism, number two. As far as I look at perhaps religious scripture, most Americans are still Christian. You will find a description of life beginning at the quickening. Well, this is not conception. This is several months later. I don't have a problem with states banning abortion after the first trimester, because that's when 99% of them occur anyway. In fact, in the first 6 weeks, it's not a surgical procedure. They give you a pill. You can also take an abortifacient, pennyroyal, black cohosh, etc. And this is done since antiquity. I don't really have a problem with that, as long as there's an exception for rape or for a person's life being in danger. The problem is that I see some states going far further than that. And I think that it's ass backwards. It's not actually going to stop the abortion. It's just going to put some women in prison after they puncture their cervix. And I don't know, that's not necessarily a polite society.
So what are you religiously?
I'm vaguely paganistic, and I'm an occultist.
What led you on the path to paganism, and what do you think makes it better than Christianity?
Oh, I don't stress that it's better than any other system. It's just the one that I happen to have chosen. It makes me the most happy. And I could discard it at any time, assuming new evidence comes in with regards to my spiritual endeavors. When I was younger, I saw a demon, a very literal demon, which has informed and transformed my life over time. I believe in the supernatural. I believe in the occult. I believe in the magical. I can't really hold, therefore, to like the liberal Christianity I was born up in, because it deviates from recognizing sort of the experiences that I've had. I also consider it unhelpful in my particular path because it openly tells people, don't explore this. This book is evil. Don't crack it open. The devil will come inside you or something. I've been told these things before by people who are religious. As far as the pagan side of it goes, I see paganism as the birthright of all people in the world. Every group within the world has paganism in their ancestry. And imperialistic religious movements such as Christianity and Islam have attempted to wipe them out. They've been unsuccessful. They almost succeeded for over 1,000 years. Now there's a resurgence of the people they once tried to kill. And I find it really funny because now all of their religions have become woke and diverse and very accepting and so forth.
In the new age,
angering many of the lay people. Paganism's not doing that. There are a handful of pagan congregations that have pride parades. Most of them are still going out into the woods and murdering animals with a hatchet. They're not woke in any way. In fact, they get in trouble constantly among the main lamestream for being nationalistic, ethno-nationalistic. They're basically Nazis. These wokenists over here, oh my God, they believe in having some sort of European remnant birthright. The ones that we promote in other parts of the world, well, they're clearly Nazis.
What is your favorite pagan religion? Slavic, Norse, Celtic, or Greek?
Well, there are a million other. Well, I mean, there are a million others in the world. I like them all. I see them as a positive thing. It's more tribalistic. It's more natural. It is the way that things, in my opinion, should be. It doesn't mean strife against other groups of people. It means cross appreciation. So you have, like, for instance, a group of Norse pagans. They have their doctrines, they have their dogmas, they have their practices. Then you have a group of pagans that are from West Africa. They can study one another's literature. They can write poems about one another's literature. They can hold philosophical discourse. They can get drunk together and have a party. They can do all these wonderful brotherhoodly things. They don't need to fight one another because they have no imperialistic aspect. There's no reason to try to kill these other people and convert them to your religion because the religion is held within your own community, within your family, your tribe, and so forth. I see that as inherently better than what we really saw with Judeo-Christianity, with Islam, and some of these others, which was 2,000 years of nonstop warfare. We don't see this with the Norse, although they invaded people. It wasn't to try to convert them. It was because they wanted silver and they wanted other goods. The Vikings did this. When we see the Greek pagans, when we see their wars, by and large, they were wars of liberation at the time. Alexander was greeted as a hero and worshipped as Pharaoh when he rolled into Egypt to kick out the Persians. I see that paganism as more positive, yes.
Do you now, when doing stuff like you do, for example, have done drugs before, right?
Lots of them.
What is your most crazy experience when having a high that you just felt like you were one with the universe and just like, wow, this is just mind-blowing?
Oh, so you mean a positive high? I was thinking a mind-blowing, that would be my overdose that stopped me from doing psychedelics. As far as my most positive high, well, there were a lot of them. Probably my second trip on Morning Glory comes to mind. And the feeling of one togetherness with your surroundings definitely was oversized with that one. Also saw some visual patterns like hallucinations and changing colors, which is difficult to obtain on Morning Glory. It's not as strong as LSD. I would say mescaline, the second time I tried it, would probably be a close second. I felt almost like a sub-Kundalini awakening. I felt this weird energy going up and down my spine that felt just like a massage. And it was blissful, actually. Had some hallucinations on that. LSD was a big one. I used salvia. That wasn't quite so much spiritual as just really wonky and interesting.
Do you think that all drugs should be illegal, and how much damage do you think the war on drugs has done to society as a whole?
The war on drugs has been a net detriment to all societies it's been part of, and has killed far more people than it would ever have saved. All drugs should be decriminalized, not legal. The problem with legalizing them is you still have legislation on the book regarding them, which means the government will come in and tax and regulate. I don't want that. I think people should be able to grow as many weed plants as they want. They should be able to smoke it, trade it in the streets. I don't care. The only exceptions, DUI, aggravation of other crimes. So, you got drunk and you hit someone with your car. That is an aggravating factor because you shouldn't have been drunk and driving to begin with. You shouldn't get stoned and drive. You got high on crack and assaulted someone. Aggravation, perfectly fine. So DUI, aggravation, or you're selling to kids. You're giving it to someone who is not fully formed. People under 18 are not full-fledged citizens. It is proper to regulate their day-to-day lives in a different manner to an extent, although the parents should really be the ones doing this mainly, because parents have become weak, pathetic, and apathetic. Sometimes the state, unfortunately, has to step in. That's why I think that parents should take a much more active role in their child's education and day-to-day life. Maybe they'd hate you less if you spent more time with them.
Like, I know for a fact in Thailand, actually, isn't that they become the first country in the world that made it illegal to be able to grow marijuana plants. Did you hear about that?
They have sub-legalized marijuana there. They've made it clear that actually using it is still illegal, though. So basically, it's just for the commercial purposes of selling hemp products. But that was already legal to an extent here in the Netherlands and in certain other Euro countries as well, and certain U.S. states.
In your times going to political rallies in the United States,
I've never been to a political rally.
Oh, you never been? Never been.
No, the closest I went to a debate between Bernie Sanders and Rich Tarrant back in, that was the 2007, 2008 era when I was in high school. Got second prize, actually, in senior law. I did a write-up about it and got second prize. Got a $100 gift card to Staples. Good times.
What did you use with the gift card? What did you buy from there?
I was just about to go to college. I got a USB drive, a webcam, what else did I get? A printer and printer paper and a few other things because I was going to college.
Did you get a photo with Bernie Sanders saying, "Yeah, I'm Bernie's #1 fan"?
Don't blame me. I supported Rich Tarrant in that one.
What was better about Rich Tarrant than Bernie Sanders?
The fact that he wasn't Bernie Sanders, and it really just boiled down to that. Rich Tarrant was this rich Christian investor. I think he was actually initially from New York, like Bernie anyway. And he ran against him. And I was like, well, Bernie's been in there forever. He hasn't accomplished anything. So, and this is back when I was a liberal. So,
so with the United States, the future of the country, do you think that United States is heading to civil war, or is it heading into something even better? Like, is it the future bleak, or is the future bad for it?
The U.S. will not enter a civil war. Right now, we're in the 70s, and it could get worse, but we've been through worse. We went through a Great Depression for over a decade. We've had various wars, a literal civil war, and all sorts of other strife in the United States. People now are generally more well-connected. They're capable of communicating with each other. My only problem is that too few people are taking this opportunity. We've got a golden opportunity. Every bit of knowledge and learning is at people's fingertips, and they would rather shitpost all day about how others shouldn't self-improve than actually self-improving themselves using the resources available. Learn a new skill, drop a vice, make society better, and make your life better.
With all these new growing woke trends, what do you think is the most ridiculous one you've seen this year so far?
Trying to tack drag onto the LGBTQ thing. I'm leaving the T out on purpose. Trying to tack an overtly sexualized practice, which is basically a minstrel show only using gender, onto the concept of, hey, I happen to be gay, hey, I happen to be bisexual or whatever, is an absolute farce. And then attempting to drag children into it is a grooming activity. There is no word mincing to be had here. It's unacceptable. It should literally be illegal because you're exposing small children who, in any other context, you can't sexualize them. You're exposing them to that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, if there were a straight pride parade and straight people were getting more or less naked, simulating sex acts, saying overtly sexual things, twerking and giving lap dances and stuff and talking about anal lube, and a bunch of kids were there, CPS would show up. But the fact that it's billed as a pride parade somehow shields it from this being the case, under the auspices of the idea that if you're against it, you hate gay people or you hate LGBTQ in general. Well, no, drag is not even connected with that. And most of these individuals who are gay, lesbian, whatever, agree with me, by the way. I've spoken with some of them, people who are gay or whatever. Drag is effectively nothing more than a minstrel show. Many of the men that participate are straight. They just want to sexualize kids. They're having little kids reach into their underwear and stuff a $5 bill up their asshole or something like that. How did we get to the point where this had anything to do with pride? It doesn't, quite clearly. And people protesting it are called transphobic or something, which additionally makes no sense. That also is not the same as drag. And then you've got all these retards, these morons from like the Patriot Front or the Proud Boys or something showing up, muddying the waters even further, a bunch of supposedly white right-wing groups that glow in the dark in order to try to sow discord. That's very helpful. These people are totally not feds.
Did you see the people who, the right-wing group that got arrested, that was in, what was it, in Idaho?
Idaho, yeah, that was Patriot Fund. They were in the back of a U-Haul when they got detained. And an informant told them, hey, they plan to go here and riot at the Pride Parade, so you might want to nab them. That's, again, it's not suspicious at all.
That sounds absolutely ridiculous, doesn't it? Like, especially how they try to, like, label. You know, it's absolutely... I was speaking to someone earlier, and they said that, like, about Bill Maher, and a lot of Bill Maher seems to be changing his more opinion. Do you feel like the more Bill Maher becomes like awake, do you think he will wake up and be labeled as a white wing extremist, just like Joe Rogan is, even though he's not even, right winger?
Yeah, I don't think that Bill Maher is waking up. I just think that he's got the same views he's had for 20 years anyway, and the left has gone away from that particular position. He's basically a broken clock. Occasionally, he happens to have an opinion that makes sense. Those are the ones that deviate from the far, far left. But he's never been on the far, far left anyway. He's a neoliberal. He's one of the Brian Griffin liberals, like the sweater-wearing NPR cup holders, especially since he's rich. So he's a penthouse dweller as well. So he is a hypocrite and NIMBYist. That doesn't mean that he's wrong about the far left. They've already, though, called him a Nazi. They've already indicated that Bill Maher has joined the alt-right because he thinks that women exist. Bill Maher is on the alt-right now. He questions whether we should be nuking Moscow or whatever. And I say that's not evidence that Bill Maher is intelligent or that he's mentally stable. It's more evidence that the people that are going crazy over what he's saying are far more mentally unstable.
That's a very good point. And with that, where do you think that liberalism as a whole in Europe and America and around the world and especially in New Zealand, Australia, when do you think it really started to lose its way and meaning and it became so extremist?
I think it started to go to hell around the time corporations realized that if they just injected idpol, they could make people buy their products and even defend them by pretending to be woke, by flying the rainbow flag on Twitter, etc., by supporting BLM, putting the BLM flag out in front of their HQ. They realize that leftoids are stupid. They're very low info individuals. They see that, and they will not only leave the corporation alone, but potentially attack its allies. It's a microcosm of what's done with craptivists, SPLC, ADL, etc. They are effectively wielded by corporations as a cudgel against their competitors. We see no better example of this than big tech attacking new tech. There's a hit piece against Subscribestar last week from the SPLC, for example, because they platform individuals that don't use big tech anymore. They platform the competitors of the priority creators and the very, very carefully astroturfed and cherry-picked people that are on those platforms. Well, they don't want that. And the SPLC and ADL, by default, by proxy, don't want that either, because they get big money from these big corporations, which have so carefully branded themselves as family-friendly and diverse and so forth. One look at Apple. Apple uses slave labor over in China to make its products. It jacks the price up by more than 100%. It uses minerals that are mined in North Korea, of all places. But they fly the rainbow flag, and 90% of these morons won't protest the company. It used to be the liberalists and the leftists in the 2000s would say, hell, you're using like 12-year-old sweatshop laborers and stuff like this, and environmental degradation and political corruption, organ harvesting over in China and so forth. None of these people talk about it anymore. It's amazing how quickly all of those arguments and all of that discourse disappeared entirely the second that these people started putting the pride flag on their profiles.
So, speaking of politics, where are you hoping that for your content to go moving forward, and what future plans do you have for your channel?
I plan, well, when I'm back in the United States, is going to be a lot of gun and garden related stuff. Lots of forests and hikes and so forth as well. There's not as many hiking opportunities here because the Netherlands is as flat as a washboard, and hiking to a Vermonter means mountains and hills. I'll be doing that, but I'm going to keep doing the political stuff, the literary stuff, etc. Basically until I die. I've pretty much settled myself into a career trajectory. At this point, I'd be unemployable in any other manner anyway, so I might as well go with it.
What was your favorite debate you think you probably ever had with anybody?
I think my favorite debate was against Anomaly, and that's because he completely went nuts towards the end and started breaking down into, gibberish and going crazy. And it was pretty fun. And then he blocked me not many weeks later because I was criticizing him on Twitter. And it was a topical, I can't even remember what I said. It was a topical disagreement. He just straight up blocked me. And I'm like, okay, wow.
Fair enough. Do you ever get this phase that people seem to, has anyone ever said to you that you look like John Lennon?
Yeah, actually one time when we were back in Demon, there was some dude who was clearly a little bit nutso in a power wheelchair, and he said something about John and Yoko, and it was considered hilarious. But yes, I have. And also Joey Ramone.
Who is Joey Ramone?
You don't know who the Ramones are?
No, I'm not too sure. I'm not entirely an expert.
Look up Pet Sematary by the Ramones and watch one of the greatest music videos ever. I also get compared to Judas Iscariot, which is probably more accurate philosophically.
So, is there anything else you would like to say, 666?
Yeah, it's been great to be on here, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Anything else you would like to say for the future, like to give any hope for Americans, never to give up? What would be your wise words?
Yeah, not just Americans, but everyone else. Take my advice. You can prepare for the worst, and the best way to do that is to build new skills, drop a vice if you can. It's not always possible. Store up some food. That's probably a good idea right now in the hyperinflationary cycle, but don't lose hope, because human beings have been through some crazy shit over the years, and your ancestors wouldn't have been able to give birth to you if they were black-pilled and they said, hey, things suck right now, I'm just going to give up. So don't give up. Just keep plowing through it. Just fucking do what you have to do.
I have one more thing to say. I see that you also do a lot of gardening.
Yes.
What is your best advice on how to grow fruit, plants, and other events in case of economic crash?
If you have land, raised beds are good, although in some climates may not be permitting. Get azomite. This is a white chafed powder. I think it comes from Utah, and it's full of trace minerals, mainly the rare earth minerals, the micronutrients, not like nitrogen and phosphates and stuff, but the micronutrients. Trust me, take just a little bit of that shit and dig it around your pepper plants, tomatoes, whatever. Just sort of munch it into the soil with your hands around the root system. Water it in. Watch as your yield increases. And also It helps to stave off disease because often it is caused by nutritional deficiencies. Try hugelkultur. Try lasagna gardening. Branch out, try terra preta. Trust me, you'll never regret it if you end up delving into that. Study some soil science, and the plants that grow in that soil will thank you.
Sounds good. Sounds very good advice. I just want to say thank you very much for coming on my show, 666. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. Where can people find you?
They can look up Styxhexenhammer666 Official on Twitter and half a dozen other platforms, or Styxhexenhammer666 on YouTube, BitChute, and I can't remember exactly the usernames for every single site that I'm on, because sometimes it drops the 666 and sometimes it's Styx666 Official. But anyway, you can look in the descriptions of any of my videos cross-platform, and there's the links.
Thank you very much, 666, for coming on my show. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. And I just want to say to everyone, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. And I really love the wise words that 666 gave. Remember, humanity has always been for a lot, but we never gave up. We always came through it. Stay safe, guys. Never give up. Stay strong.